Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, the regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk at the Nasdaq market site is an AI voice clone. Let's take it away.
Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, a regulatory landscape, and capital markets. This segment is presented by Charles Schwab. I'm your real host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk at the Nasdaq market site, we have Dave Gerry, CEO of Bugcrowd, Rachel Tobac, co-founder and CEO of Social Proof Security, and Dave Chronister, CEO of Parameter Security. We're here to discuss the methodologies of ethical hackers and building a resilient cybersecurity culture. It is great to have all of you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. Dave, it's great to see you again. Explain to us some of the methodologies of ethical hackers. You don't necessarily associate ethical and hacking in the same sentence.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen this entire market develop really over the last decade, right? Where you've seen organizations realize that they're outmatched. They're facing millions of adversaries on a daily basis, and they can't possibly stay up to speed with the latest tactics, the techniques, and the attacks that they're seeing come in from adversaries and bad actors. And what we've seen happen is that organizations are embracing these ethical hackers, right? And it took them a long time to get comfortable with the idea of associating a hacker with somebody good, right? That's somebody that brings to bear the ingenuity and the creativity of being able to help them stay a step ahead. And what we're seeing happen is the diversity of that crowd has really changed. So all of those methodologies, whether that be leveraging automation, whether that's leveraging AI as a tool to help a defender operate at machine speed, or whether that's simply just new ways of thinking about gaining entry, that's all changing in real time, and it's a really exciting part of the community that we get to serve.
Yeah, Rachel, it really is an exciting part because it's evolving so quickly. Yeah. I mean, with deepfakes as an example, it's really hard to discern what's real and what's not many times.
Yeah, and this technology is changing week over week. So just when you think you have an understanding of how it functions, the voice clones change, the video deepfake capabilities change, and organizations and people have to stay up to date with that.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you think about it from the enterprise point of view, what happens if you have someone from the C-suite deliver a message and it's really not them? I mean, that can move markets at times.
It can, and we've seen instances where an email may go out, even authorized social engineering training, that the president says something and it gets leaked, and next thing you know, it's in the news. Because how are you going to determine it's legitimate or not when it's coming through your email from the CEO? You just go ahead and assume it's legitimate.
Yeah, and the machines can work much more quickly than a human brain can to discern what's real and what's not.
They can try different things. They can determine if it's legitimate or not. But still, it's still kind of an untested environment and technology out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's challenging, Dave, for enterprise to manage that has the resources, I mean, you know, for us consumers, it makes it even more challenging to figure out, is this from my bank? Is this, you know, in fact, for my kid?
Yeah. Yeah, it is getting increasingly hard to verify the legitimacy of these, right? So our recommendations, some of the really simple ones are, we talked a little bit about the bank example, call the number on the back of your card, don't accept the incoming call, right? Verify by going to a local branch. It is getting tougher to see, and as much as the tools are getting more sophisticated to defend against this, right? The telcos are investing significantly to help block spoofing, to help block some of the capabilities that bad actors are using, but they're still finding ways to advance that. To Rachel's point, this changes on a daily and weekly basis. So helping consumers stay educated on the simple foundational things of don't give away information when it's an inbound call, right? Verify with a bank or financial institution directly based on a number that you can find on your card or on their website, and make sure to report these things, right? They want to know what's happening, and they have fraud departments that are targeting some of these bad actors and trying to disrupt them where possible.
How can you tell, Rachel, with a video, as an example, if it is a deepfake? What are some clues that we should be looking for?
Yeah, well, these recommendations are going to change, like I said, week over week, but here's what we know right now in 2025. Oftentimes, the deepfakes will kind of blink in reverse. So it almost looks like the eye is going like this. In addition, oftentimes they will move unnaturally. So there's a lot of like head shaking. We also see a lot of times that they look down and they have trouble looking back up at a normal moment. Right. And so this is what we know right now in 2025. If you tell somebody to kind of put their hand in front of their face and they're doing a live video deepfake inside of like a Zoom, Teams, WebEx style call, this will get distorted at the edges, almost like a box around their face. But, you know, give it another 6 months and those recommendations won't be relevant anymore.
So when you think about mitigating risk in today's threat landscape, how do you keep up with technology that's changing week to week?
Well, I think what you have to look at is what the heart of it is it's social engineering and it's hacking your emotions. So I think some of the things that you have to look at is not necessarily technical solutions. Anti-phishing, security awareness training is great, but also teaching your employees, or if you're by yourself, to take 10 seconds. Does this seem legitimate? Is it evoking some sort of emotion? And if it is, maybe evaluate it a little bit more. It's going to, no matter how the technology changes, those basic frameworks will help you in avoiding some sort of attack like this.
It seems like that gut instinct really does count with identifying some of these.
It does, but the problem you run into as well is a lot of times at the end of the day, every decision we make is emotional, and sometimes we just don't trust our own gut. And we feel if we get that email from our CEO, if we do not act on it immediately, we could get in trouble. Where instead, kind of what David mentioned, reply back, hey, I'm right on this.
Right.
And seeing, you'll find that just verifying like that will help quite a bit.
I also think, Dave, it's also repetitive patterns as well. For example, you're not going to give an employee access to areas of the business that they don't use or they have no business, being involved with. It's almost like my CEO doesn't email me. If we get one of the larger corporate ones, I'm pretty confident it's from her. But I think you also have to use common sense a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit the old saying, slow down to speed up.
Yeah.
Right? Just pause, to Dave's point, just pause. You don't need to immediately go buy those gift cards or wire that money. I think take a moment, verify through internal channels, right? If you're using Slack or you're using Teams, send some messages out to folks internally to understand, hey, is this a legitimate request? And also leverage common sense here a little bit too, right? If you don't typically have communication directly with the CEO and suddenly they're asking you to go do something or change something, question why, right? What happened, what changed, why is the process and the typical way that we do business changing, and is that somebody trying to force something through quickly? And to Dave's point, they do prey on emotion, right? So they prey on that employee or that consumer that is fine. That's why you see so many of these happen within financial services, is they're preying on the money aspect, right? You're going to lose access to your account. You've just had fraud on your account, something to get somebody emotionally connected to whatever that challenge is, and then try to get them to elicit action as quickly as possible. And that's where just slow down, go back to the basics, and then look into, okay, why is this happening, right? Most folks will have access to their online banking, right? You can quickly pull in, log into your account, and verify, did something really happen to your account?
How does one become an ethical hacker? I mean, there's thousands of them out there. As you mentioned the numbers from DEF CON, 40 to 50,000.
I think it's 30 to 40,000 this year. I actually got my start at DEF CON, hacking in the glass booth in front of an audience of 500 hackers. They put me in a glass booth. I have to hack live over the phone within 20 minutes. I'm doing a lot of things that we talk about here to demonstrate how to stay safe. You know, calling people, using that sense of urgency and authority and reciprocity, giving out information about ourselves to encourage you to, give information about yourself. Ultimately, what we're doing is we're just using principles of persuasion to convince people to do things that they would never normally do.
Yeah, I also think these types of exercises at the enterprise level is helpful, being able to communicate cybersecurity needs to the board, as an example. Because you have to understand your audience, how you would communicate this as a cyber professional to the C-suite, to the businesses, to the revenue teams, to the board. And I think when you're able to do these exercises in real time, it makes it more digestible and easier to put into context.
It does, and I think the big key there is that we focus more on the risk than the actual technology when we're reporting to the boards. Again, they're spending upwards of tens of millions of dollars depending on the company to protect them. Is it effective? It's never going to be 100% effective, so are we in there what we call their acceptable level of risk? And helping them understand, well, this is why IT is asking for this additional funds to help us protect ourselves a little bit more like that. It's more than just a guesswork. Well, I guess we're doing okay from a security standpoint. You know, when we started 20 years ago, no one really wanted to do any sort of attacks, ethical hacking, but now they understand it's validating, it's third-party validation of, is our program actually working?
I mean, of course, if everything is for the most part moving to cloud and off-prem, right, your attack surfaces expands, but I also think being proactive versus reactive to it is really changing the mindset in terms of how cybersecurity is approached. To Rachel's point, if this is changing week after week, it's not something you set it and forget it. This is almost like a fire drill. You have to practice it and update it all the time, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, the best organizations are consistently updating their incident response plans. They're consistently doing tabletop exercises, to Dave's point, to understand what is our acceptable risk? Where are we willing to say that, yes, we understand we're never going to be 100% protected, but we're confident that we've taken the right steps. You're seeing that regulators with the SEC are starting to enforce cyber expertise on board of directors. You're starting to see that organizations are starting to mimic that even as private companies to make sure that they have the right expertise around the table. I'm a firm believer that the CISO always reports directly to the CEO. That's something that if we're going to start to hold CISOs liable for breaches and security incidences, that you better bet that the CEO is sitting there next to them, because the CISO doesn't operate in a vacuum. Security is ultimately the responsibility of the entire organization.
Right.
It's a culture that starts at the top to make sure you're building that in, that you have that awareness, that you're not penalizing an employee because they didn't respond fast enough to you because they were doing their due diligence. And that starts with every one of us. And I think as we've seen ethical hacking become a bigger part of companies' vernacular and a bigger part of their security program, they're able to tap into experts like Rachel that otherwise they have no way to go hire. Right, we're seeing that there's something like 4 million unfilled jobs in cyber, right? I think a lot of that is, as an industry, we've failed from a recruiting standpoint, that we had certain ideas of what was required, and we've seen that start to change, but also being able to tap into this amazing flex capacity in the market that exists and be able to get exactly the right expert at exactly the right time.
Rachel, I think part of the challenge as well is, and not just for cybersecurity, but in general, being able for a company to get out of operating in silos.
Right.
It really is challenging, and I think with new technologies that are coming out, like Agentic AI as an example, we're able to get that continuous bird's eye view, is going to be a step forward for enterprise being able to model out their risk and also respond to cyber incidences.
That's exactly right. Now, we're seeing attackers use agentic style attacks to programmatically go out there and do what we would do one person at a time. And they can place 10,000 calls all at once, right? But we can also use agentic style defense. So hopefully we're going to be able to do kind of like whack-a-mole as we go.
Yeah, well, you did this year at DEF CON, not you, but you had judged one of the contests where it was agentic AI hacking.
That's exactly
What
right.
was the method that they used?
Yeah, so basically you're setting up an LLM, a large language model on the back end, and you have that LLM in real time respond to people in phone calls. You can spoof that phone number, so for all intents and purposes, on caller ID, it looks like somebody that you trust is calling, like someone from IT support or an executive at your company. And then the LLM goes and responds in real time to ask questions and demonstrate the risk of people on phone calls that oftentimes believe that phishing only happens over email, not text message and phone call, which we've seen a huge increase in 2025.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you've made. And I also think, Dave, when you're building a resilient cyber culture, that it's not just a nice thing to have to protect the brand. I think it's going to be a competitive advantage at the end of the day. Vendors aren't going to do business with you if you're not able to demonstrate that you're cyber first.
Right. Again, if to this day, if you are getting breached, if you have an issue, people reflect it. It's reflected on your reputation. And even though we all understand that every company is vulnerable, if you're consistently getting hit and you're not learning your lesson, a lot of people are going to see that, again, as a high risk, and they're no longer going to do business with you. You're going to have consumers that really are worried about their PII, their PHI, and maybe go somewhere else because they're going to be the ones dealing with the fallout at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, because personal identity is really the commodity in 2025 and certainly beyond.
It's one of them,
yeah.
But unfortunately, credit card numbers and social security numbers are out there so much. I've seen the social security number for my grandpa who died in 1984 out on the deep web, where they're looking for resources, they're looking for a lot of things, but the PII, the PHI are easy targets that end users and citizens are going to be dealing with for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, it just seems as if the need for data privacy and cybersecurity standards just increases day to day, Dave.
I think we're seeing that, right? You saw an executive order come out of the previous administration. You've seen an executive order around AI safety come out of this organization. I think the promising side that we've seen most recently is it's relying on NIST frameworks.
Yep.
So they are relying on industry standards versus trying to create something new. So I think we are going to continue to see a maturation of this, but the regulatory environment is always going to be a step behind what we're seeing in the wild, right? To your earlier point, Rachel, you're seeing these change so frequently that there's no way you can keep up to pace from a regulatory perspective. So this really does come down to private organizations working in collaboration with the public sector to make sure that we're feeding them information as well, and that there is a directional approach that organizations can take as an industry standard that somewhat stays a step ahead. And I think competitively, that is going to be an advantage for organizations. We're seeing the request for supply chain security more than anything else right now.
Yep.
Where organizations are grappling with, I have thousands of vendors that I work with and partners that I work with on a daily basis. How do I make sure that I'm secure if one of them has a security incident? And how do you test that connectivity? And that goes all the way back to the social engineering piece as well, where how do you know one of those help desk folks that you think you're talking to is actually working for the vendor that you think you're talking to?
Which is interesting that you brought up the NIST framework, because they have the ability to be more nimble as the environment continues to evolve versus having to get it through legislation. As an example, I think public-private partnerships as well as academia is going to be critical for this to evolve in a way that's timely. It's not even just an enterprise issue, it's a national security issue as well.
It is.
Yeah. So I'm interested, how does one become a hacker? Is it progression through school, or is it you have your career and you kind of figure out this is something I want to try, or how does one become a hacker?
Well, we know that there are many different paths to becoming a hacker. I did not take a traditional path, so I did not go to school for security.
Right.
In fact, I don't even know if you can go to school right now and get a social engineering degree. I don't think that exists. But I got my start at DEF CON, just hacking in the glass booth, trying my attack methods over the phone, and eventually you gain enough skills that people want to hire you and showcase how to stay safe internally at their companies too.
Yeah, but that makes sense though, Dave, because you're taking real life experience and what that you have dealt with or observations that you have made, and you're able to apply it in an environment where maybe there isn't standard curriculum just yet.
Right, in the same sense. The way I got into it is I was in IT. Email was my big thing, and then obviously having a cop for a dad and a church secretary for a mom, social engineering became very important for it. So it was more understanding the technology and then going, how can I actually bypass the security? And again, that's what I look for with a lot of people is I want someone that has the critical thinking skills but understands that technology really well. And that may not be something you necessarily see in college, but you would see on what we call the blue side or the defensive side. Yeah. Of the industry. Yeah,
it is a fascinating space that you guys are in. Thanks so much for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me from MarketSite. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.